Yes, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for joining us here on INC Live for the UFC 297 preview show. My name is Karl Bainbridge and I am joined by the man on the right hand side of my screen. He is the anvil to my Bret Hart. He's my friend and yours. It's Joe Neal. Joe, thank you very much for joining us.
Very good to be here. I wish I thought of a Canadian team now, but I was going to say I'm glad to be the R-Truth to your Miz.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it was either going to be that or the Jim Davidson to my John Virgo, but I think that might have gone through over a lot of people's heads. And when you read up on Jim Davidson, not the best comparison.
Yeah, I thought of, whenever you said, when I realized the Canadian connection for you, I thought, oh, I'll do the, Dynamite Kid. And I was like, nah, they're British anyways. I don't know why. I was, because of this Hart family association, I always, at a glance, the British Bulldogs, for some reason, I think are Canadian.
Yeah. We're about 2 minutes into the video and we've already started talking about wrestling.
Is that a record?
It's been a while, Joe. It's been a while. We've got it all out of our chest. We've had a lot of fun over the festive period, so it's good to get back on track. This is our first preview show of 2024. UFC 297 is just around the corner. It'll be taking place on the 20th of January 2024. And as you've sort of alluded to, with all of the comparisons, it will be taking place in Canada, our second Canadian event since we came back from lockdown. And I don't know about you, Joe, I think this card has been getting a lot of criticism, and we'll talk about one of the reasons why a little bit later on. But I think compared to what we got with 289, the last time we went to Canada, I think a stronger card overall.
Oh, yeah. I will say, I don't think the main events, the two title fights, are going to be barn burners, and they're not big names. We have one big name in there with Strickland, but I think they're interesting because they hold ramifications, which is what I care about. You got guys like Mike Malott, who is very interesting to me. Arnold Allen gets to be on the big stage, which is super exciting, and Chris Curtis is always kind of fun, at least unless his opponent knows how to circle, but you know.
Yeah, which he proper kicked off at Jack Hermanson for, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, Jack Hermanson just kind of circled away from him and just shut him down, and he was furious over it.
Yeah, I actually think that could be a sneaky little barn burner, but obviously we will get into it. Yeah. But I think one of the big reasons why people are downplaying 297 is because of what we're seeing in the months after. We look at these pay-per-views and the build-up to UFC 300, and it was the same thing as what happened when the UFC were building up to 200. You looked at 198, 199, 200 itself. They stacked it with a lot of star power. It was intended to be this big blockbuster. And I think because of that, 297 has sort of been a bit lost in the shuffle, especially when it lost Rakic and Blachowicz and Dominic Reyes versus Ulberg. I think if it had those two fights, I think people would be a lot more positive about it.
Mm-hmm. I think so too. I kind of think of it two comparisons come to mind is... I think about remember, on at post Royal Rumble, sorry to bring up wrestling again, but post Royal Rumble, you have Elimination Chamber, which that match is always kind of fun, but everything else on that card you don't really care about. And then no one cared about Fastlane.
Fastlane.
Yeah, no one cares about Fastlane. And then, because that's just kind of how it is. There's a slow period right before your biggest show. And I think about UFC 99 before UFC 100. UFC 99, do you remember the main event for that? I know you weren't watching, but you have a great knowledge.
Are we talking 199 or 99?
No, 99. I remember
Was it Vanderlei versus Franklin?
Yeah, and the co-main event was Czech Congo versus unproven and still kind of unknown Cain Velasquez.
Ooh.
Yeah, so people complained about that card because I remember 98 as well. I think I do. Actually, I might have just lost it. But because early in that year, you had BJ Penn and GSP, and that was huge. And then it was really slow. And then 99 had that card. I always remember that card because that was the first card I went and saw with my family after getting back into the sport and going, dude, this Cain Velasquez guy, he's actually pretty good. I hope he, keeps going.
Are you subtly hinting at people to try and nominate that one for a retro review?
That'd be cool. That'd be a really cool walk down memory lane for me. I mean, I got to do the Elite XC one, which was my first card back. Watching it with my dad, super cool. going like, Kimbo versus Ken Shamrock? That dude's still fighting? I'm like, all right, you know. Little did I know Bellator would drag him out later.
I will say I have been taken aback, and thank you very much for this as well to anybody who's tuning in. I want to say a big thank you to the people who have been supporting the retro reviews now being on INC Live. I think it's a better fit. The numbers seem to be doing really well. The feedback seems to be quite positive, and we've got another one which hopefully will be out at either this week or next week, which we're really looking forward to. And there is a bit of a Canadian theme to that one. So we'll leave you on the tenterhooks, as it were. That's all coming up later on in the show. For now, though, we are going to be talking about the prelims. You can see those on your screen right now. And of course, being in Canada, we've got a lot of Canadian talent filling out this prelim portion of the card. Are there any particular names that stand out for you as people that we should be looking out for?
Jasmine Jasudavicius.
Yes.
Against Priscilla Cachoeira, who is still employed for some reason. Just saying. But Jasmine Jasudavicius, despite not having a Wikipedia, don't let that fool you. She's actually pretty good. She beat Miranda Maverick, who I think is very good. So I expect this to be kind of a showcase for her in the grand scheme of things. So we'll see. The fight that sounds really fun is Sean Woodson versus Charles Jourdain. Oh, that's a prelim barn burner. Like, in terms of fun factor, you could put that on the main card.
It's going to be an interesting one as well for Sean Woodson, because at one point, I wouldn't say people were eyeing him up as a prospect, but he was just somebody that people kept a curious eye on. Let's just keep an eye on this guy, let's see what he's able to do. And that seemed to have died down a little bit. Like, there is no real fanfare about Sean Woodson coming into this.
Was it because of the Luis Saldana fight?
I think so, yes.
Because, like, I'm, like, looking at his record. He only has one loss to Juicy J. Luis Saldana should have KO'd him. Like, there's no excuse in my mind. Like, he just kept, like, walking off after, like, trying to be cool, and it just failed miserably for him. And then he illegally kneed him in the head, and then they got the split draw because of the point taken. But he should have been a KO for Saldana, but I think, or Saldana technically, but I don't know. Like, he's 6'2" at a 145, long limbs, attacks the body well, can jump and fly if he needs to. He's fun. He's a barrel of fun. And Charles Jourdain, it was actually kind of fun watching him beat up Kron Gracie a while back. That was really fun for me. Maybe because I'm a Gracie hater, you know. But I mean, it was just kind of fun watching that.
That's one thing that's really come to mind for me recently is, obviously, we've done quite a few of videos since we last met up, and one of them was the worst Gracie moments. And I don't think you're in a minority. It's really taken me aback by how venomous some fans are towards the Gracie family in 2024.
I have nothing but respect for them for what they've done for the sport. That said, if they're gonna fight, I'm rooting against them.
I'm surprised you haven't.
I just don't like them. I don't know what it is.
I'm surprised you haven't brought up Brad Katona versus Garrett Armfield. It's Katona's first fight since winning Tough.
He beat Cody Gibson, right?
What's that?
Was it Cody Gibson? He beat
Cody Gibson, and it was a barn burner.
Yes, I actually forgot about that fight until you. So when you said, I saw it, and it didn't click, and then when you said his name, it went like, yeah, that fight's insane. Cody Gibson, Brad Katona was an incredible fight. Probably a top 5 fight of last year, admittingly. I think everyone kind of picked the same one for fight of the year. I think we all picked
Volk Makhachev.
Islam. Yeah, the first one, which that fight's just basically perfect in my brain. But yeah, I mean, I think that fight was really good. Definitely a really good fight. So I'm actually kind of interested in seeing what he does post-Tough.
Yep. Good.
Gillian Robertson also fights on the undercard.
She does, yes. Yeah. And I think we've seen Gillian's ceiling in terms of what she's capable of. I think she's always going to be like a fun prelim fighter. If she gets you on the ground, it could be some fast scrambles. There's potential of that with Polyana Viana because she's quite ground heavy as well. Or we get sloppy kickboxing match.
Don't remind me. I didn't say who her opponent was, despite being a absolutely beautiful woman that I have respect for. And she could kill me in a fight, sure. I will never forgive her for.
The JJ
I would
Aldrich
ne-
fight.
I would never forgive her. If she asked me out on a date, I would go. I would have a great time, and I wouldn't call her back. um, I stole that joke from. Oh, funny enough, actually, I'm wearing the shirt from Anchorman, but I've just cleaned it up. Yeah, no. I think Gillian. I'm kind of curious how she's gonna look, though. This is why I'm interested in that fight. Is they're not just fighters; they're people too, and she's kind of had her name dragged through the mud because of personal life kind of exploding. And the consensus between fans is it's her fault. It's not our job to get into that kind of gossip. But that said, I'm genuinely curious how she's going to perform after that kind of thing. And I am rooting for her because of said prior fight, you know. But I think I'm going to check that out. The prelims, I always love watching the prelims. The prelims, you always get to see usually some pretty good names. But that Jourdain and Sean Woodson fight is just...
And the prelims of 282 I thought were better than the main card.
Oh yeah, the prelims were amazing. I remember watching the prelims with my best friend, and he goes, "All right, I'm not watching the fights. I'm gonna go on a date." And he just left. Him and his girlfriend got up and left. And I went, I guess I'm watching these by myself. And I got stuck watching the full fight card by myself. It wasn't a good card.
Fingers crossed. The prelims for this one build up, and fingers crossed that the main card surpasses what we saw at 296. And kicking off the main card, we are going to the featherweight division and a potential title eliminator in that weight class. Arnold Allen, what many people consider to be Britain's best hope for another UFC champion. He's going to be taking on Movsar Evloev, who is the number 9 seed right now, unbeaten so far in his career. And the betting odds show that Evloev is a minus 140 favourite. You can get Allen in at plus 170. Now, obviously, a lot of this is going to depend on what happens between Volkanovski and Topuria. But if Volk was to win this one, are we looking at the winner of this fight potentially being next?
I don't think if Arnold Allen wins, sadly, because his last fight he lost to Max Holloway in a good fight, but he was beaten pretty handily. But who beats Max? Unless your last name is Volkanovski or you're a rugby player, who beats Max at 145? So I think Evloev could, and it's funny too. I'm surprised he's the betting odds favorite because I feel like at least when it comes to like crowd consensus, his stock kind of took a big hit because of the Diego Lopez fight.
I wonder if it could be... I think it's two things. I think it's that zero next to his name. I think that always plays a factor when it comes to the betting odds. But also as well, there's always been the stigma around British fighters when it comes to wrestling.
It's fair. It's fair. Arnold Allen's got good counter wrestling though. Like he's pretty good at not getting put on his butt. You know, he's definitely a much better striker in this matchup. Evloev is going to have to just rush for this takedown and just, try and take him down. But I kind of feel like Allen. I'm trying to think of a guy who's like actively trying taking him down. I know Gilbert Melendez tried doing it, and he had no success. But that was after he was getting kind of beat up. And is there anybody I can think of without looking it up that has tried taking Arnold Allen down? I know Sadiq Youssef and him was just a stand-up war.
I can't think of anyone off the top of my head. Maybe Mads Burnell?
Yes, actually, Mads Burnell did try to. And but he's not the best wrestler, but his jiu-jitsu is insane. Mads Burnell is awesome on the ground. So if he can get you there.
So bearing this in mind, like you sort of touched on it there, do you think the UFC made a mistake booking Max versus Arnold Allen? Because let's say Arnold had fought somebody else after the Calvin Kattar fight and won that one. You would have had a guy on a 13-fight winning streak who would have been going up against Volkanovski. And you'd be thinking, it would have made that fight seem a lot more sellable, a lot more intriguing because of that winning streak. But if you were to give Arnold Allen a title fight now, bearing in mind the Max fight's just happened, you're just going to see it we're going to see it in the same way that we did with Yair. Like, I don't think people
Yeah,
bought Yair as a contender because he had that loss to Max quite recently.
I agree with that. I think that's a kind of a pitfall we could run into. I think he should have fought a guy like at the time he was unbeaten, but Bryce Mitchell, still unbeaten, Taporia, a Josh Emmett instead of like I think there was a couple of names he could have taken. I mean, obviously, he beat Cater as well. Arnold Allen did.
Like, his standing at the
Um,
time might not have been as high, but in terms of name value, what about Zombie?
yeah, actually, yeah. Um, that would have hurt, but I would have, I would have been okay with it. It would have just hurt to watch, if that makes sense. Um, yeah, I think he needs like another name under his belt because I mean I think his most impressive win, besides the uh, Calvin Cater one, I really like that Sadiq Youssef one. I think that's a pretty good feather in his cap when they were both on the way up. Both guys had a ton of hype on them, and excuse me, someone's out has to go.
Certainly so. So let's delve into the detail when it comes to Arnold Allen here. A 19-2 record. The Holloway loss snapped a 12-fight winning streak. It was the first time he'd lost in the UFC. Notable wins outside of Sadiq Youssef. We touched on some of them. Calvin Cater, Dan Hooker, who should never have been fighting at featherweight. Gilbert
Yeah,
Melendez and Matt Burnell. 7 KOs, 4 submissions, and never been stopped in his career. Both his losses are by decision.
he's got a hell of a chin on him because Max started putting like real oomph into his shots, and he did nearly finish him, but he didn't. There's a difference between nearly getting it and getting it.
And to be honest, I don't think Arnold Allen fought badly against Max Holloway. It's a sign of how good Max is as a fighter that he just wasn't able to get it done. Like, it reminded me a little bit of, like, I'm trying to think, like Robbie Lawler versus Matt Brown, in that
Oh, that fight's so
it's a
good.
really good fight. Like, you could tell that Robbie was going to win the fight, but you couldn't say that Matt Brown fought badly.
No, yeah, it was one of those like this is a competitive. Even though I'm scoring 5 rounds for Max, this is still a competitive fight, and that's kind of like I think that like Yair also had that kind of close competitive fight with Max like that, where I thought Max was easily winning, but or not, we're not easily winning, but winning for sure most of the time, but it was competitive, and that's like a pitfall of 145 though. I think like 145, when you look at its talent, you go, oh, how is this not the best division on the planet right now? Because historically it usually is like it's usually 55 30 45 and 35, right? Or like historically the best divisions. Back in the day you could even add 170 to that nowadays. um, but yeah, the problem is you have two guys at the top who are just killing off everybody. Like it almost I think what they did with Taporia was smart because do you really want to risk a guy like Max just piecing him up? And it's like, cool, now are we doing Max Holloway, Volkanovski 6? You know? And that's a similar problem I think Flyweight's going to have with Pantoja and Moreno. But I I don't know. It's kind of a weird problem that division has because you have guys like Josh Emmett just had a huge KO over Bryce Mitchell, who I still think is good. Dan Ige is a lot of fun. I don't think he's ever getting a title shot, but he's fun. He's fun to watch. Calvin Cater when he comes back. You have Yair, Brian Ortega,
Lopez.
Tiporia, yeah, Diego Lopez, Vloyev. Like, there's a lot of fun names, and the Pat Sabatini's even pretty fun. Um, but you have to kind of consider like they have to go through that potential wood chipper in Max Holloway just to get a title shot, and that kind of hurts.
Yeah. I was actually surprised they didn't book Max versus Evloev, and I say this for a few reasons, because Max has never fought a guy who's like that Russian-style wrestler before, so that would have been something to really test out his takedown defense.
Oh yeah,
If Max wins, you kill off a contender who, let's be honest, doesn't have the most exciting fighting style. If Evloev wins, he's killed off the sort of semi-boss. He's killed off Goro to Volkanovski's Shao Kahn.
yeah. That's a win-win in matchmaking, I think. Like as bad as that sounds, like I'm not trying to, trying to think, what's the phrase? I don't want to use the one I thought of. Not to offend anyone's taste in what they find exciting, because it's obviously a subjective thing, but um, not a lot of people like the aggressive wrestling style. Like I only like one or two guys who do it overall in terms of their stylings, but I think that's a win-win because I know the UFC probably doesn't want like we have five wrestlers as our world champions. They don't like that.
No.
There's a reason Adesanya got a huge push. It's because he's a kickboxer. They love their strikers, and that also kind of reminds me of Max almost fought Habib, and I was really interested in that matchup.
That wouldn't have gone well for Max.
I think Max would have made it. I think Max would have done better than expected. I think he would have lost still. But Max was supremely confident at that press conference, and he almost made me a believer. But they almost fought, and it's kind of. And if Max would have won one more round against Poirier, they would have fought. Actually, kind of crazy how close those guys got to cross and pass a couple times to think about. But that's a talk for another day.
You mentioned that there with the wrestling heavy style, because I speak to a lot of people, like Kaposa especially, and he often brings up that a lot of the guys on the regional scene fighting in these promotions like ACA, places like that, he says that a lot of their talent is better than what's in the UFC, but he is of the belief that the UFC choose not to sign those guys because they don't want to have the risk of every champion being a Dagestani smesher. So they intentionally pass over fighters who have that kind of style.
I mean, it's probably that's a great guy to talk to about that stuff. The best when it comes to regional scene or like any non-major promotion, that guy is the wealth of knowledge. But that's a really interesting point because you got to think. I mean, I know Joe Rogan used to say like the best base for MMA is wrestling, and like these Sambo wrestlers are pretty terrifying when it comes to how like they deal with it. They might have found, in my opinion, maybe the second best style of like how to fight in MMA. That's like there's no objective number one style. Well, there is, but no one talks about how good it is, I think. But the second best style has to be this Sambo wrestling hybrid that these Dagestani guys just kind of figured out. And for the record, the best style, of course, I think you can guess it.
Joe Sondo?
No, I was going to say teep kick into double leg. I'm shocked I kept the straight face through all that. I kept looking at myself in my view to try to see like, am I cracking? I'm shocked I kept a straight face through all that. That's the number one though. But number two's got to be the Sambo wrestling. And
this does bring us nicely onto Evloev, a guy who does use that kind of style. And we sort of hinted on it with our little diatribe there. Is this guy letting himself down with this wrestling-centric approach? Is he going through the sort of like Bilal hoops, like where people kind of find his style a bit boring and the UFC don't want to push him as hard because of it? Because you think 17-0, never lost in the UFC, outside of Hakeem Dawodu, never looked close to losing.
Maybe because he doesn't have any finishes is the thing. That's like what's gonna hurt him. And some guys just don't have power, Like there's nothing like Michael Bisping got crapped on forever for being pillow-handed, and he is. Like he's gonna beat you with 1,000 punches, not one or two. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? And I don't think there's anything wrong with a guy who is dominant on the ground and just can't snatch that submission, Like, not everybody's a Diego Lopez where you touch the ground and suddenly you're in lava. Which I keep bringing up him because, seriously, that fight is fantastic between those two. That fight is fantastic. Not because of Evloev, sadly, but takes two to tango, so. But, yeah, I think I hate the Belal Muhammad comparison because it's so true. That is a fear you kind of have for a guy. Because I feel Belal Muhammad, I would rather take a nap than watch him fight. just got to be open with myself and honest. I want him to get a title shot.
Yes.
I'm gonna watch it. I'm gonna drink as much coffee and caffeine to watch it, but because he deserves it. It's a meritocracy. Just because like I talked about that in a retro review very recently, no spoilers, but about being boring's fine. Like, because it's a sport first, it's not entertainment. And some people don't see that. Some people think it's an entertainment first product. I think it's a sport first product, you know. And I think it could hurt him, but I think at some point you're just undeniable. Like Habib had all the injuries and stuff like that, and bad weight cuts that stopped him from getting an earlier title shot. But he was a finisher on the ground. Like he was finishing guys. He had KOs on the feet. So, and the UFC did like him. He would have gotten a title shot early. He wouldn't have been in that kind of situation where it's like never lost a round except for the Gleason Tebow fight. You know, he wouldn't. He would have still had that hype if he never got hurt or injured or anything like that. Like he was supposed to fight for the title, but Conor got a title shot over him. That's why he was mad after the one of my favorite post-fight interviews when he beat Michael Johnson and he called all of Ireland a bunch of chickens, which is apparently, I didn't know this until like a year or so after that fight. That is like an incredibly offensive insult in his cult in Habib's culture. Like there's the phrase "estupido," you know, for calling someone stupid in Spanish. That's a big insult in like Mexico. That's a huge insult. Apparently, chicken is like that. You know, it'd be like calling someone the C word or the T word. Apparently, that's a huge insult. So I thought it was just kind of funny. Second language, that's the only word he knows is an insult. But no, apparently that's a huge insult. But anyways, with Evloev, I really do fear that potential situation for him because he doesn't deserve that. You know, there's nothing wrong with being boring. I'm not going to want, like, there's a ton of guys I didn't want to watch fight throughout the UFC. And it just is what it is. If you're the best, I'm going to watch you. Even if I want to or not, I'm going to watch you because I want to see who the best is. That's just my opinion on it.
And how do you think these two guys fare off against one another? Is this a straight up striker versus wrestler style? Is this a case of how can Arnold Allen hold himself on the ground if he gets taken down? Is Evloev just trying to survive in the striking until he can get the takedown? Is this just striker versus grappler, or is there more intangibles to that?
I always kind of feel like everyone wants to say, I've heard people say this and I disagree with it, that there is no such thing as striker grappler matchups anymore, when that totally isn't the case. Everybody knows everything, but not everyone's a master at everything. Is kind of how it's evolved into, you know. It isn't like Tank Abbott, who's never seen a wrestling mat in his life outside of going to see 3 Count for tickets. But I couldn't help it. You know, I think it is going to be that. I think I'm very curious about Arnold Allen's takedown defense because he seems like a super well-rounded guy. Like he seems like, in all my memories of him, I don't remember him really getting taken down. And if he does, he's right back up. And he's usually the one maintaining clinch control. He has good clinch techniques. I see him. I'm picking Allen to win by decision. I think it's going to be gutsy. I don't know if he can finish Evloev. We've never seen a guy get finished, but also with these wrestling types, you also don't see him get hit a ton. Like, you know, that's like Matt Hughes wasn't the most durable guy in the world, but he was also kind of hard to hit because he's diving on your legs every 30 seconds. I'm really curious about that. And if I also remember correctly, Arnold Allen, he's a southpaw, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, and Evloev is, I believe he fights orthodox when I was researching this. He was mostly kind of squared up because he's prepping for the takedown, wasn't really striking a ton. But something I talk about, I feel like in every video, every video I ever do, I always talk about it because it's so common. The open side matchup, that left knee is ready to intercept whenever he ducks down. Always, you never know. It's just there. I've seen Joaquin Hansen melt guys in Pride and in Dream with that shot. So I always think there's a good
Was it
chance
Hooker
at it.
versus Pearson? Something similar?
Yeah, Hooker Pearson. Hooker switched stances and came up the middle with it, as because Pearson Pearson had like the most underrated head movement ever, and Pearson went to duck and dip inside as Hooker was bringing the knee up to counter it, and it was just one of the best KOs ever. And he did that to Jim Miller also. Dan Hooker did. Jim, he blasted Jim Miller the same way, if I remember correctly. Who fights tonight? I'm actually really excited.
Yeah.
Because I want him to fight Patty.
Oh, all fought yesterday. So congratulations, Jim Miller, on a big win. Or commiserations, Jim. Let's fingers crossed you can get back for UFC 300.
It felt very, very OSW of us. Oh, he didn't pull the trigger. Boo, boo, Tony Khan. Or, yeah, he did it. Yeah, yeah. Congratulations.
I am going to be picking Evloev to win this one. I just think there's a lot of question marks about what Arnold Allen can do if he does get taken down. Because you find a lot of guys who do have great takedown defense, they are a little bit clueless when they are actually there. It's something which I do have a concern with when it comes to the core main event. A little bit of a spoiler alert. But I don't think Evloev is going to be doing enough to finish him. So I think it's going to be another... Yeah. He's sort of like the anti-Shafkat, where it's like 18-0, but all of them by decision.
That's a very good way to describe it, the anti-Shafkat.
So we move on to fight number 2, and we're going up to the middleweight division. It is very interesting to see, and I was going to mention this when it came to the preview show, but middleweight is the heaviest weight class featured on this card. So I think there might be a little bit of a leaning towards the smaller divisions. I think that's always good to see, because I'm not a big fan of the heaviest 2 weight classes, to be honest.
They kind of suck. It's just, you're much more polite than me. I have no problem. Yeah. With saying that I don't think they're very good.
The great thing about being British is you get all the politeness, but at the same time, Britain has some of the most offensive insults that you can come across. Like, trust me, I know some Brits who can be very foul-mouthed.
I'm a Jimmy Carr fan, so I'm aware. I listened to Jimmy Carr earlier today, and I just watched a bunch of his jokes, and it's like, this guy's awesome.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of other like great British comedians that I recommend. I always used to love Vic and Bob, Reeves and Mortimer. Like, if you ever watch Shooting Stars, if you get a chance, one of the funniest TV shows of all time.
I do like me a good British television show.
Yeah.
I was a big fan of the IT Crowd. I watched that once a year almost.
Very good. Very good. And speaking of very good, are we expecting that from Chris Curtis versus Marc-Andre Barriault? Now, it's interesting to note that both of these guys, their last appearance came on the same card, ironically enough, in Canada, UFC 289. Chris Curtis had a no contest against Nasruddin Imavov, and Marc-Andre Barriault had a surprisingly fun match against Eric Anders. So, I think there's a lot of people that sort of turn their nose up looking at this fight. I think there's a lot more upside to it than people think.
This fight's going to be really fun, honestly. This fight's probably... I think it's a sleeper fight of the night pick. Because I think the safe... Actually, this is probably the safe pick for fight of the night. I think the sleeper pick would be something I'm picking later on. But this is probably the best, bang for the buck for a fight night pick. Or fight of the night pick.
And this fight to me as well is... I sort of made this reference when Barriault fought Eric Anders. It is the quintessential Mick Maynard fight. Like, Mick Maynard seems to love these kind of middleweights and 205ers who, they might not be the most technical, but they make up with it with sort of like natural physicality and sort of like muscle upon muscle, more sort of like built units. I think that's the best way to call them.
Beef.
Yeah. Wow. And this is another example of it. Chris Curtis fits that trope. Barriault certainly does. It's very much a Mick Maynard fight.
Oh, yeah. 2 big, heavy, sweaty guys. Someone get Vince McMahon out of there. Like...
Are you suggesting Gary Strider make his MMA debut?
Hear me out. Him and Otis. The winner gets ownership of... Wow! Yeah. This fight is going to be insane, I think. This is a fight I have pitched to people like, no, trust me, come over, watch this card. Trust me, this card's good, I swear. Because there's no, like, the name value just isn't quite here. But this fight's sick, I think. Because Barrio, he is a big, powerful brute that is just athleticism and power. His KO over Julian Marquez is horrifying. And Chris Curtis is, if you're just, if you're not technical, Chris Curtis has a chance of letting it rip. And when he does, he lights dudes up.
Yeah.
And Barrio is kind of a tank. So that sounds like just a recipe for a fun night.
Chris Curtis, I think he's been one of the sort of success stories of this sort of like post-Apex era, because he was a guy who, he was a bit of a journeyman figure. He fought in the PFL. He was actually close to retiring. I think he did retire after losing on the PFL. He gets a short notice opportunity against Phil Hawes and jumps on it with both hands, and I think he's turned into a little bit of a fan favourite as well. I mean, you look at some of these notable wins, Joaquin Buckley, who we finished, Brendan Allen, which is a win which has aged very well, Phil Hawes, as we mentioned, and also, even if it wasn't the most exciting fight, the guy neutralised and stuffed every single one of Adolfo Vieira's takedowns.
Oh, yeah.
Which I thought was a very impressive performance, even if the fight itself wasn't the most exciting.
Shows you how balanced he is.
Yes.
Like, yeah. I think that's like I think Chris Curtis is like, he's probably a little too good to be a boy, but I think he gets in. Like, if he's 100% boy worthy, because he is so much fun.
If you have Chris Curtis on your boy stable, I'm not turning my nose up at that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's not in mine, but yeah. Mine though just seems to be. Why is it Cheyenne Vlisma 7 times?
She's a taken woman. She just had a baby.
Well, I'm not gonna say anything. I like my job here. That's what I'll say. You know.
Hey, I'll let you get away with all of the Chev slander. You're okay for now.
Oh, score. Yeah, I've dated moms before. Okay, listen, I'll be fine. But I forgot she had a baby. That's why she hasn't been around. Yeah. Breaks my heart. Anyways, back to this fight. And yeah, I think this fight's. I don't think no one's talking about how fun this fight is. I think it's going to be a blast. Because Curtis, here's what I like about him. He can kick. He doesn't really kick too often. But he is a southpaw boxer, and that just loves to attack the body, and he loves to hand fight. Like his lead hand, his right hand is either right here, looking to Philly shell, kind of like his teammate and friend Sean Strickland, or he's taking away the lead hand and looking to exploit the South Orthodox guys with the left hand, which is just so much fun for me. I love that.
I think he reads the fight game really well. That's the big thing that I've noticed with Chris Curtis is, especially against guys who throw with a lot of volume, eventually he starts getting the read on you. So I think he's very good at making these sort of mid-fight adjustments to sort of, once he realises what a guy is going to throw and when, that's when he's able to counter, and that's where you get the Phil Hawes knockout. That's how you get the Brendan Allen knockout, because he was facing a lot of early adversity in both of those matches and came back to win.
Yeah, he's a slow starter. Like, he has the KO power to put you out first shot, but he's very methodical in his approach. And sometimes that's to a fault, because for as smart as the guy definitely comes across at times, there are other times where he isn't seem that like well versed in the striking game, because Chad Hermanson just circled like to his weak side and shut him down. And that was weird that Chris Curtis had no answer for that. Like, and I'm not trying to jeopardize my job here, but it was very reminiscent to me of your girl taking on the queen of the wall install like years ago, like just circling, just shuts him down, you know? And like it kind of reminded me of that. Obviously not the same outcome, but Chris Curtis was livid after that fight over being shut down just by a guy circling on him. And it wasn't like I think it's because I didn't want to fight.
I think it's because Curtis knew as well that was probably his like big opportunity to break through. Because if he was to beat Hermanson, he's in the top 10, and people like I could see him headlining an Apex fight night if he beats Hermanson.
Oh yeah, he would have fought Roman Dolidze, probably knocked him out, making me a happy man, and then
I wonder why.
There was a reason I brought up Cheyenne of Lismos. I was always going to bring it around there. I saw my connection and I took it. But no, I mean, like, Chris Curtis was on a good streak and that just shut him down. And it's definitely cooled him off a bit, but he's still a barrel of fun.
So post in your comments, who is more jealous, Joe or JP Bays?
Yeah, that's a fair one.
Yeah.
I'm probably more jealous, but I don't know. Who knows?
Plenty of fish, Joe. Don't worry. Let's talk about Power Bar himself then. Marc-Andre Barriault, 16-6 record. He is coming into this fight off beating Eric Anders in the opener of UFC 289. A 2-fight winning streak, and as well as the Anders win, he also has wins over Julian Marquez, as you referenced. The Beverly Hills Ninja Jordan Wright was another one of his big wins. And I'm saying this one just because of his name, Dolce Lungiambula. So 5-5 so far in the UFC with 1 no contest, 10 KOs, 1 submission, only ever been stopped once in his career, which came 16 seconds against Chidi Njokuani.
Yeah, that fight's insane though. Like Chidi, actually, let me rephrase. Chidi's had some insane fights though. Yeah. He's a barrel of fun too.
Now, Barriault was somebody who, in my opinion, he got a lot of criticism very early on in his UFC run, because I think a lot of people did see him as a bit of a wall installer, a bit of a workhorse fighter, rather than somebody who's actively going to go for finishes. And people just thought, well, yeah, just keep this guy on the Apex prelims. He'll do a decent job, but I'm not really invested in seeing him. There has been
so to say.
There has been a definite upturn though in what he's doing with his hands. He's starting to utilize his power a lot more. That sort of grindy style is still there, but I'm no longer going into a Barriault fight thinking this is going to be a slog.
Yeah, because he never Holly homed you like he kind of would, but he was attacking in the clinch. It was like
Usman before the title.
Yeah, Usman pre-title is a good one. It also reminds me of like a less effective and Randy Couture, dirty boxing kind of grind, which I love. Me a good dirty boxing beat him up, but he was just really hitting really hard in the clinch, but not hitting where he needs to, if that makes sense. Like his placements of shots, and now he's kind of figured it out, and now he understands that, hey, if I catch you at all, if I just touch you, you're wobbled. And I think that's like that confidence has like really helped him out a ton. Yeah. And I think you said it best when you said you're no longer seeing this fight going up. Here comes a slog. Like, no, it's usually going to be pretty fun because he's just a tank of a man, it feels like. And hits, I have it down, he's a brute.
Yeah. And his cardio keeps up throughout the fight. That's the reason they call him Power Bar, because as the fight goes longer, he gets stronger.
Oh, yeah. Scary guy. And that's what makes this matchup so exciting, is he has that really good cardio. Chris Curtis loves to attack the body, but when you're attacking the body, your head's a little open. So does that mean Barriault lands a power shot? Like, there's just so many little questions here. I think that make this very interesting.
And Barriault's striking is very
it's coming
output.
Along.
Yeah, I think it's output based, which again plays into Curtis.
Yeah. Chris Curtis loves these fights against these less technical guys. Like, he loves the high volume but not a ton of technique on guys, so he can just kind of smash them. That said, this guy's a little different now. It's gonna be, this fight is just this fight almost feels like coin toss. What were the odds again? Was it Chris Curtis favored?
Curtis is favored as -170.
Okay. Yeah, this feels almost like a coin flip to me. Yeah. I know what I'm going with. I'm personally picking Curtis to win. I think, though, if he doesn't finish him in the first 2 rounds, he's in for a horrendous 3rd round, unless those body shots just add up. Yeah. If he's successful in the body shots, you might be able to level the playing field, if not keep that momentum in the 3rd round. But it's very interesting because I always like seeing how body shots affect a guy with a great gas tank. You know, even though I'm a fan of his, for Doom, kneeing the body and a kicking the body of Kane on top of the high altitude led to Verdum winning that fight.
I'm leaning towards Curtis as well. I'm not confident enough to say definitely get your money on Chris Curtis to win.
Yeah.
I think he's got the better striking between the two. I think he has a few more weapons in the stand-up. Where I do have a concern, though, is I can see Barrio being the bigger man, because we have got to remember Chris Curtis was a 170er. He could just very easily just sort of like wall and stall, use some dirty boxing, throw some knees in there, and as we saw with the Jack Manson fight, Chris Curtis does get very frustrated if fights don't go his way, and it could lead to him getting a little bit more reckless and getting wound up. So I think if Barrio does make this a clinch-heavy battle, it could easily turn into a 30-27.
Yeah. If not a late finish because he got too reckless and gets caught.
Yes.
You know? That's something I fear, because I've been talking about how interesting this fight is, you know, and it's like, I'm really excited. I'm genuinely really excited for this fight. But Barrio has the potential to Holly Holm it.
I love how Holly Holm has become a verb.
I want to hear it on other channels. I want to see how deep my influence can go, because I see people talking about it in the comments, and that warms my heart. That means I've done something positive. Is I've introduced a phrase into the vocabulary. But
I tried my hardest with Bart Simpson striking, but Wine Mom boxing seemed to get more favoured.
I listen. In fairness, once again on a retro review, I used both of them. So the Wine Mom boxing, the Bart Simpson style. I won't say who it was, but let's just say his name rhymes with Cake Neal's. That's horrible. It's a horrible joke. Well,
you come to the right place. UFC 297 preview show. Like, if you want really bad humour, actually, you know, that Jim Davidson John Virgo comparison I was going to make, it does fit, just with how bad the humour is.
I like to view comedy as long as I'm laughing, I'm okay with it. Anyways,
shall we move to the next fight?
Yes, I would love to.
Yes, we're going down to the welterweight division for this one, and we have got Neal Magny, who is going to be taking on Mike Malott. Now, the bookmakers' odds for this one are fairly one-sided. Mike Malott comes in at a minus 250 favourite. You can get Neal Magny a plus 205. Neal Magny, as he has done pretty much since for the past decade, it seems, is once again serving as the welterweight gatekeeper. Now, we've talked recently about the sort of decline of Canadian MMA. Like, a lot of people thought that with GSP being so successful, there was going to be this influx of new talent who were going to sort of take over the UFC. Mm-hmm. That hasn't panned out. Is Mike Malott the real deal or the best of a bad bunch?
I think he's the real deal, but I wonder where his ceiling is. I'm really curious, because I think of these like prospects at 170. I think you have the big three prospects at 170. You have, you know, obviously the king, Shavkat, who probably, I think, winning a title this year. I'm not picking against him ever. Like, so high on that bandwagon. But then you have Ian Machado Gary, who he's good. And I think Mike Malott. And I think Mike Malott's I think he deserves to be in those three. And I actually, maybe it's because I'm an Ian Gary hater, and it just is bias, because he's really cringy to me. But he just tries too hard. It comes across very
Conor-esque.
Yeah, like he's like Colby Covington really wanted to be heel Kurt Angle to me, and it kind of threw me off. Kamaru Usman always come across as like trying really hard to be cool and awesome, and Ian Gary comes across as like, I'm Irish, so I should be just like Conor. Like, and it kind of hits me that same way of like, oh, you're just copying Kurt, you're just copying Conor. It's awkward. But so I'm not an Ian Gary guy. But that said, I think Mike Malott probably has a higher ceiling. I don't know how high. Like obviously, it's really hard to compare a guy to GSP, but I think a more fair and fun comparison could be Rory McDonald. Like in terms of maybe where is it? Hopefully, where his ceiling is, because I don't want to say anyone's ceiling's near GSP because that's the greatest ever. That's just he's just the greatest fighter of all time.
Because I was thinking about this, we did a video like years ago about the five
mm,
greatest Canadians, and I'm tempted to say it's been a long time since I watched it. It was either Newton, Hominick, or Corte, who I had at number 3.
I think you had Newton
Yeah, I think it was Newton.
because he was a UFC champion.
Yes.
Yeah, because I always think of the big three, and that's in Newton. You know, the two aforementioned of like Rory GSP and then Carlos Newton.
Any love for Kaufman and Davis?
Oh, Kaufman
Sarah
does deserve
Kaufman is
love.
incredibly
Yeah,
underrated.
I totally forgot. Alexa Davis is an honorable mention, if not 5, maybe. I think you can argue 5, but maybe at least honorable mention. But Sarah Kaufman's 4, no question, actually, over Cote and Hominick, and I'm a Mark Hominick fan. But yeah, Kaufman for sure. She was so good. One of the best slam KOs this side of post Pride Rampage. That one might be my second favorite, like ever. Okay, like over Roxy, you know.
So, what is it in particular that's making you so high on Mike Malott?
His walkout song. No, it is great. He comes out to Sum 41, Fat Lip, which is when because remember I researched him for the preview show we did when they last went to Canada, and we were both making fun of the fact that Dana White was like, and if you don't know, now you know. Like he's doing us a favor.
Yeah.
Like you're doing us a favor by putting it together a non-consequential fight on the main card. Um, but yeah, when that song came on, I was pumped, and he looked outstanding. He looked 5 levels ahead of his competition, which it could just be because he's Canadian. It reminded me a lot of like Rory and GSP, how there was times when they would fight guys, and you go, "You're not even in the same ballpark. This isn't even close." And he got in there, got a quick submission. He looked great on the feet. He looked great on the ground. And then when you're researching him, you go, dude, this guy can kind of do a little bit of everything. He doesn't seem like he has a base in anything, at least from like just watching him. He's definitely a better grappler than he is a striker. But man, this guy can kind of just do it all, which I think in the landscape of 170, where you have a lot of specialists, that's a big plus. Being able to take away the specialist's like way of fighting you and put them somewhere they're not too comfortable with. Like that's one reason why Shavkat's so successful is he'll strike with the grapplers and he'll grapple with the strikers. And a 170, like what we mentioned earlier, there is no like the striker grappler. Like everyone's at least good in everything, but 170 feels like specialist central. You have Jeff Neal, southpaw power puncher. That's his specialty. And Vicente Luque, like he can Darce choke you, but his boxing and striking is just unbelievable. Then what's it called? Gilbert Burns. I almost said Gabriel. I don't know why, but Gilbert Burns, super high jiu-jitsu, but he has the power. But Shavkat's just kind of saying, oh, where are you really good at? I'm going to fight you here. I'm going to fight you the other way. And I think I always really like that in prospects coming up.
And of course, Colby's specialty, which is just circling on the outside, not doing anything.
Yeah, but having a sick walkout song. Hold on, I'm seeing a connection here. No, I do love his walkout song, even if he doesn't deserve it.
Yeah. The one concern I do have when it comes to Mike Malott, like I'm similar to you. I think there is upside. And I'm not sure where the ceiling is.
Yeah.
I could see him sort of like being sort of like number 9, number 10, that sort of space. But 10 wins, 10 submissions. My one concern, though, is if you look at the fighters he's beaten so far in the UFC, we talk about Adam Fugit, Johan Linnaeus, Mickey Gall. It's a big jump to go from those guys, and no offense to them, because they could easily kick my ass in. It's a big jump to go from Adam Fugit to Neil Magny.
Yeah, that is fair.
Yep. Couple of things that stand out for me when it comes to Mike Malott. I think he's very good at capitalizing when he has his opponents vulnerable. Because the thing that really stood out for me was when he fought Adam Fugit, he rocked him with that punch in the second round, and then almost immediately, being the alpha male guy, jumps on the guillotine. And that's a real skill to sort of like say, I've got you hurt, I'm going to lock that in. Because I've seen a lot of fighters that they just lose all the composure when they have someone hurt. Like Cyril Gane, for example. Like for all the praise that we give Cyril Gane for his striking, when he has someone hurt, he just goes into berserker mode.
He was hammer fisting the back of Spivak's head. Like, because he just kind of like it's so weird.
Yeah. I think he's got good boxing off the back foot as well, but I think mainly it's his grappling, which is his forte.
Yeah.
Which is going to be interesting when it comes to Neil Magny, because we say this pretty much every time when it comes to Neil Magny. If you want the fight to go to ground, he's okay with that. If you want to keep it standing, he's okay with that.
Yeah.
Like no strengths, no weaknesses to a fault.
His skill is literally just this, you know?
And that's what makes him such a good gatekeeper. Yeah,
he's the perfect one. I gotta be honest, he almost has, like, I think you and me are both in agreement that the Hall of Fame should be much stricter, but if they're going to be loose with it, like they have been, then Neil Magny's earned it, like, as far as I'm concerned, because he is the greatest gatekeeper ever, I think. Because him and pre-championship Bisping, I think, gotta be the best ever.
Yeah.
Like, you want a guy who can just, you know, he can test every area of a guy.
Yeah. I've got like a sort of like gatekeeping Hall of Fame. It like I actually did a video of it years ago of like the UFC's greatest ever MMA's greatest gatekeepers, and I think it was like Cowboy, Magny, Gary Goodridge, Rocky and Tisha. I'm trying to think there was somebody else who I had in there. Obviously Bisping as well, but Bisping, does he kind of qualify with him being a champion now?
See, Arlovsky is another one I would want to say, but he's been champion before.
Yeah.
And now he's just undercard gatekeeper. Like, that's not fair.
Because I've actually got a list here. Like, I always make a note of some of the notable wins on a fighter's record. But with Magny, I've also got a list of his notable losses. So these are some of the guys who've beaten him in his career. Ian Gary, Gilbert Burns, Shavkat, Chiesa, Ponzinibbio, Dos Anjos, Lorenz Larkin, Damian Maia.
Yeah.
Only the best fighters beat Neil Magny.
Yeah. If you beat him, no matter at this era, previous era, anything, that's a feather in the cap for sure. Because if, like, what's it called? Like, the only guy there that didn't really break through to that next level, and that's not his fault, I think, personally, is Larkin. I thought Larkin had all the potential in the world. And that was also really early in Magny's career, if I remember correctly. But Lorenz Larkin, that's a boy stable guy.
Very much so.
Oh, yeah. He was so great.
Yeah. Were you concerned at all by Neil Magny's performance against Ian Gary? Because you can look at it two ways, like Ian Gary putting on this striking showcase, but I did kind of feel that was the first time that Neil Magny started to look a little bit old.
Yeah, he looked old, I thought. I think, like, there's that, everyone loves that stupid thing of him flipping off Neil Magny as they're walking back to his corner. But at the same time, you go, dude, Neil Magny's been fighting forever. He's got more mileage in the past 2 years than you have in your whole career. Like, you know, we talk about, we've had the discussion of MMA age before. Like, Shogun says he's this old, but in reality, he's 80. Neil Magny might be a senior citizen too, in terms of mileage, and that he did look old in his last fight, and I think that's one reason why the odds are so, you know, skewed towards Mike Malott. But also at the same time, Neil Magny hates getting low kicked. Yeah. Like, that is just great scouting, because Ponzinibbio let it rip on him for like 3 rounds before he face planted him.
So which way are you leaning towards this one here? Is this something that Neil Magny can pull out of his bag of tricks? Because the things you can always say about Neil Magny, great jab, a great overhand right. He can outwork you in the clinch, and he's got fantastic cardio.
Hmm. He's got an underrated uppercut too. He was throwing that uppercut a lot against Jeff Neal, another name he's beaten. And he would uppercut inside to get the clinch, which was super impressive to me. That said, picking Mike Malott by submission, I think Mike Malott I think he's really good. I also kind of root for him because it's got to be kind of cool living his life. If you think about it, like if you're Mike Malott, he's an average sized guy in terms of height, but he trains at Team Alpha Male. He probably feels like Stefan Struve walking in there. Yeah, he probably feels like he's got to feel like Stefan Struve walking in there. Like Stefan Struve at at like the horse races meeting the jockeys. It's probably what it feels like.
Have you ever seen that picture of Struve and Mighty Mouse together?
It's hilarious.
And this was clean shaven DJ as well, so he looks about 10.
Yeah. There's a picture of me somewhere. I'm sure I can find it. Maybe it's in like my dad's like photo albums that he had. But there's a picture of me in high school meeting Kevin Durant, who's a basketball player. He used to play for the Oklahoma City Thunder. So they used to say Kevin Durant was like, oh, he's 6'8" or whatever. No, he was 7 foot this whole time. I don't know why they lie about heights in NBA, but they do. Kevin Durant was 7 foot, and it was terrifying when he like high-fived me because I was only 5'4" in high school. Like, I'm an inch taller than I was then, and it's just, hey. I imagine it probably feels like that. Mike Malott he's probably living like a king in Alpha Male. He's probably hiding, like, oh my God, he's probably hiding like cookies and biscuits in like their room at the highest shelf. And just so Uriah and like Joey B are like, hey Mike, can you get that for me? Yeah, I can get that for you. Yeah, I can. And then he walks off and just leaves them. Like, oh dude, he's got to have the best life.
I was surprised to find that he used to fight at featherweight.
Yeah, because he actually looked kind of big when he got in there against Fugue. Was taller and seemed bigger, but he looked like a heftier dude, like at least solid muscle mass. That wow.
His only loss was Akeem Dawodu in the World Series of Fighting.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah,
Akeem's fun. He is a fun guy too.
I'm surprised he's not on this card.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. You never know. He could be like, he's probably going to be the successor in terms of gatekeeping. He'd probably be a top 10er one day.
He's basically featherweight to Casey.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, time for us to talk about our core main event. And Joe, is that the sound of Limp Bizkit I can hear?
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah. Yes, the women's 135 title is going to be on the line. It is Raquel Pennington who is going to be taking on Mayra Bueno Silva. You can get Raquel Pennington at plus 140. Mayra Bueno Silva comes in at its minus 170 favourite. So we're going to set the scene for people when it comes to this fight. You could make an argument sort of 2014, 2015 that the women's bantamweight division was in a pretty good place, rude health. Now, a lot of that would have been down to Ronda. A lot of that may have been like the novelty of women being in the UFC still being fresh. But it felt like one of those weight classes where I think a lot of everyday fans always kept a curious eye out for. They were intrigued to see what was going on. And it culminated UFC 193, Ronda versus Holly, 60,000 fans in Australia, and over 1 million pay-per-view buys. What the hell went wrong?
I think a lot of people just changed divisions. A lot, honestly. I think what they did is, this is a theory I have, is they started snatching up names that were good and people who could make 135 that were good, and then as soon as other weight classes opened up, they left. Like, you have people like Jessica Andrade, who has fought Rocky, even. And she's fought Rocky twice, actually, hasn't she?
Yes.
Yeah.
Andrade won the first fight, Rocky won the rematch.
Yeah. You have her. And I think like a couple other names have just kind of moved divisions as soon as they opened up. And I think another thing that happened is them adding 115 because when you add typically the higher up in weight class you go, the worse the technique is, and the finishing rate, weirdly enough, is about the same, like statistically. Like I think it was when flyweight first came to the UFC, people were going, "Oh, it's boring. Who must have watched midgets fight?" And I remember that whole like controversy with like fans not like getting into it. But someone did a statistic breakdown of it, and flyweights had the highest finish rate, and he openly said it's because they don't have as much fights. That's one reason, but they do have the highest finishing rate in terms of, even if it is a small sample size. And I think 115, I think if you could, now that we have, like, I hate being this way, a good technical division to look at, it makes the other division look worse. And then you also kind of put, I think, all their stock into Ronda. And Holly Holm got the Ronda rub for beating her. Miesha Tate got the rub for, having that great series. The first two matches are fantastic. The second one especially is a very good fight. And then Miesha beats Holly Holm. Miesha has the crown, and that's a known name because she had the Ronda rub. Then here comes Amanda Nunes, smashes her, and for some reason that Ronda rub just did not work on her. And I don't know if it's an issue of people being aware that Ronda wasn't going to show up at press conferences, or Ronda kind of turned some fans sour because of how she was when it came to losing, and they weren't even considering the option of, like, this is someone who doesn't lose, and now they're on top of the world, and then they got knocked down so far that they're on the kitchen floor now. Like, it's just kind of, it was a huge fall. You have to kind of give them some leeway, I think, in how they handle it. I don't know. I feel like it wasn't the best division in terms of technical aspects because who was it? You're gonna remember. She fought Ronda in Brazil.
Betch.
Yeah, Betch Correia. That's what it was. Betch Correia was throwing arm punches and was considered a power striker, just punching like this. So, like, you can say that there wasn't always the most technical division, but you didn't have really anything to compare it to, so it seemed like it was the greatest thing. But I don't know. I feel like even then I'm grasping at straws. Like, all this whole rant, I guess you could say I've been on. And I feel like I'm grasping at straws even.
And I'm probably going to get some blowback for this as well. I agree with you. I think that introducing strawweight and flyweight, because what that did, flyweight especially, it took away Chev, Tyler Santos, Manon Fiorot, Owen Blanchfield. Like, those could have been top-level 135ers who chose to fight in their ideal weight class. Like, if flyweight hadn't been there, you would have got all those four names. I think losing Ronda was a big ask, because Ronda was the sort of glue that held that division together. Like, rightly or wrongly, she was the one that people cared about. And once she went to pastures new, like, just the air went out the balloon. And the third one as well, and I'm probably going to get some blowback for this, but people just weren't invested in Nunes. Now, and that's not me being a hater, it's just, for whatever reason, the everyday fans, they just weren't bothered about watching her fight. Whether she was too dominant or not the biggest media personality, and from the UFC's perspective, if you know this person's going to win, and the fans aren't really getting behind her, you're not going to spend the time and the money to sign new talent to sort of push the weight class over something like featherweight or bantamweight.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Yeah. And of course, it leads to this situation we have right now. We have a vacant title, two women who, while I think they deserve it based on merit, aren't the biggest household names. And outside of, like, the true hardcore fans, like the Drake Riggses of the world, nobody is talking about this fight. People are mocking this fight for how bad they think it's going to be. Yeah. And I think that's really sad given what it once was.
It's been a steady decline. I think a lot of it is, like, I think I think putting all your promotion into one person is always a bad idea. Because, yeah, because you get the rub, like Holly got the rub, and Misha had the rub already. But it's really hard to recreate that magic again. I think the Nunes Ronda fight is, I think that's case in point right there. Is people didn't gravitate towards, the rep didn't work there. I think an example would be like, I hate going to this for the third time, but in wrestling, let's say Cody Rhodes is going to finish his story and he does it by, like Roman Reigns retires today and he finishes his story against vacant, like it isn't going to have the same oomph, like as he probably should have won it last year. It just kind of dilutes the product and dilutes the fan reception to it. And I wonder if that's why it didn't work out for Nunes. But I think Nunes, the facts that people didn't care about her, I think definitely played in. Like, there are people that cared about her. Don't get me wrong. Like, I was a Nunes fan. My friend in there, big Nunes fan. So we were around. There wasn't a lot of us.
I'd rephrase that in that it wasn't so much that people didn't care. I don't think they cared enough to go out of their way to watch her fight.
For $85 with no card behind her. You honestly, that's the best way.
Have her as a core main or put her as like a TV main event. I don't think anyone has a problem.
Yeah, it's Shevchenko. Shevchenko isn't a box office draw. Fans love her for the worst reasons. I wasn't a dig at her.
But they view Shev in the right way.
Yeah, because a lot of people are Shev fans and not our fans. Like we have fans that are Shev fans, and I feel like personally they like her for the right reasons. But there are people who like her just because they find her attractive. And
she always reminded me of Angela from The Office.
I know, yeah, you say that, and I'm not an Office guy, but every time you show me like the pictures, I go, that's the same person. What is that Office meme? They're the same picture, like yeah, it's the same picture. But people find her attractive, and I think, but she's not a box office draw, like the biggest thing box office wise she's done was, I hate being this guy because it makes it sound like I'm biased, but was her getting choked out by Grasso. That was the biggest story she's had, and how she took the loss. Like, those were the biggest stories to come out of her.
I remember she headlined the Chicago card against Holly, and that did pretty good TV numbers.
Yeah.
But a lot of that was Holly.
Exactly. Yeah. Holly. Because that was pre-Holly Home and Holly Home. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Holly still had a little bit of aura about her.
Yeah, she was still, like, kicking and punching. She wasn't, or she was still kiaing, which I hate. I hate that more than the wall install, admittingly. Caitlin Chukagian, don't fight on my cards, please, because she kias too, and it's mental nails on chalkboard for me. But I feel bad for these ladies because MBS, she's kind of unlikable, but she did choke out my someone I always like watching lose in Holly Holm. That was sweet. That was huge. And Rocky, you just got to feel for her, Like, I feel so bad after post motorcycle accident, she gets a title shot. And what happens? She gets kicked in that leg that got destroyed in that accident. You got to feel bad for her.
Yeah. So, part of the reason why it's taken so long, in my opinion, for this fight to come about was because I get the feeling they were always aiming for Juliana to be part of that fight. Mm-hmm. And once it became clear that Julie's hand injury was worse than we thought, they shifted towards Mayra. But of course, Mayra got popped by USADA because of the... what was it? It was...
it wasn't a roid. It was like Adderall, wasn't it?
Yeah, Adderall, that's it. I was going to say Ritalin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ritalin's like... That's ADHD, but I think hers was Adderall, is what she was on.
Here's the question I do have, though. Let's assume everybody was free. And it was Julie, Rocky, or Mayra. Who do you think the UFC goes for in that fight? Because whatever combination you make, there's an upside to it.
Yeah.
Who do you think the UFC would have gone for?
UFC would have done Rocky Pena, I think. That's not what I would do. I would do what we have because I think, again, you and me are pro merit,
Yes.
not pro box office. But for the box office, which is what the UFC cares about, they care about that green. They're going to do Rocky Pena. And I mean, in fairness, that was one of the most hype potential fights ever. And it still could be.
Could still be. Like, selfishly, I'm rooting for Rocky just so I can fire up that Limp Bizkit promo again.
Yeah, WrestleMania 17. Oh, you think you're special. It's so awesome. Yeah.
So let's talk about Raquel Pennington in a bit more detail here. A 15-8 record. Now, this is going to be her first fight for 12 months. She beat Ketlen Vieira on the first January card of 2023. She was scheduled to fight Aldana. Of course, Aldana getting moved into the main event meant that she served as a backup for the title fight. And nothing has come about since then. I think obviously because she has been in contention for potentially getting this title fight. So her gap between fights is a little bit longer than people think, but she has a lot of notable wins. Ketlen Vieira, as we mentioned before, but she also has wins over Aspen Ladd, Macy Chasson, Pani Kianzad, Irene Aldana when they fought back in, I think, 2019, Misha Tate, Bethe Correia, and Jessica Andrade. So I think there's a lot of people who, because of Raquel Pennington's style, don't appreciate how good she actually is. Like, that is a good portfolio of wins there.
Great record. Like, you look at the numbers of the record, it's 15-8. Sure, someone can critique that. But
look at that 8, though.
Look at
that 8. Like, I spotted this. Outside of her first career loss, which I think was like her second fight, everyone who's beaten Rocky has either fought for or won a title in a major promotion.
Yep. And she has some just fantastic wins. Like, she's on a 5-fight win streak. You know, that says something. But yeah, I have Holly Holm, Jermaine Durandamy, Amanda Nunes. Oh, Holly Holm twice. I forgot they fought once.
Yeah, we like to choose to forget the second fight. It was god awful.
Oh, I remember that fight because I bought that card. I wasn't on the channel, so it was way back in the day. I think it was like early 2020, and it was just an abysmal card. But Jessica Andrade, Leslie Smith, who's a blast and a half, Kat Zingano, who was awesome, for a long time. Like, these are big names. And then almost everyone else on this record is a name. Like, that's got to mean something. I think the only reason people don't care about her that's not fair. The only reason people aren't fans of hers is because she's kind of a blue collar fighter. Yeah, she's a workhorse. She's not gonna get in there and put you out, in under 2 rounds. She's gonna get in there. She's gonna make it grindy. She's gonna make it, a little awkward, but she's probably gonna win. And it was Ritalin, by the way. It just showed it up here. Yeah, but it was Ritalin, not Adderall for MBS. But yeah, because I pulled up her losses because I was like, who are the 8? Because I remember like 4 of them, but not all of them. But and Rocky, actually, in fairness to her, in terms of entertainment, she has probably it's definitely not number 1 anymore, but at one point was the best women's fight I had ever seen, which was her and Jessamine Duke on Tough. Whoa, that fight is I don't think that season of Tough is too good. It's okay, but wow, is that fight insane. That fight is nuts.
Yeah.
And that fight's fantastic. But yeah, I think I feel really bad for her because she's very likable. She can talk. She's well spoken. She knows how to talk, and she's comes across as very likable there too. Her style just doesn't lend to fans, and as we've said with Evloev, Belal Muhammad, and the great GSP in the past, we've talked about him in the past. That's okay. Like, I'm totally okay with it.
what do you think is Rocky's biggest strength? Because for me, I think there's two areas in particular where she does shine. I think her boxing combinations are especially good because a lot of fighters, and dare I say, unfortunately, especially in women's MMA, they do tend to headhunt a little bit. I think Rocky is
Yeah.
more capable of mixing it, like going to the body and then coming up on top. And we saw her, like, the one that comes to mind for me, she pieced up Adam Aspen Ladd when he got to the stand-up. Dare I say, I think she was doing the same thing when she fought Aldana. Like, go watch the first round of that
Yeah.
Aldana fight. Rocky had a lot of success against somebody who was expected to shine
Was
in
there,
that field.
she pieced up Misha Tate too.
And then
Yeah.
we sort of brought this up again. Like, a lot of people like to try and criticize Rocky because she does like to go into the clinch, press people up against the fence. But I think she's quite active there.
She's not Holly
She's
Holm.
not.
She's active.
She's throwing knees,
Yeah.
she's throwing uppercuts. She's using that sort of Randy Couture style of dirty boxing.
She'll get an underhook. She'll go like over underhook. So she'll have an underhook on like the right side. I remember this from the Misha Tate fight, and she'll use it to kind of like lift you up and tilt you, and then she's kneeing you. She's trying to knee you in the head, or she's using her free hand to punch at you while maintaining control. So it isn't like she's double underhooking and just laying there. She's going for an over underhook so she can have a free hand to hit you. And I think that is a great way to say like she's active.
Yeah.
You know, I always think of I'll say those are the two things that stand out for me. The number one thing is her offensive clinch work. I really like that. I don't. Everyone thinks because I make Holly homing a verb, and that I hate clinch work. I don't. I hate wall install because there's nothing happening. It's effective, sure, and I'm gonna make fun of you, but I'm not gonna like legitimately rag on somebody like disrespectfully if you do it. Except Holly Holm. I'm kidding, but I always really respect these active clinchers because it helps, at least for me, it helps me show people, hey, see how they're doing stuff there? Yeah, you didn't see that in the Holly Holm fight. This is how what this is the clinching that's cool.
It's
know?
because you
And I
it's
think-
because you did a retro review on this. The one that comes to mind for me is Mighty Mouse versus Dodson, the work he did in the clinch.
Yeah. That is one of the best ever. And another one is that I've also done in the retro review series is Randy Couture and Tim Sylvia beats him up in the clinch when they clinch up. And then you have the Gonzaga fight, which I haven't covered. I'm sure I will one day because that's a big card, big title fight at least. And Gonzaga is getting decimated in the clinch by a guy much smaller than him and just gets his nose broken in like one of the worst breaks ever. And I love dirty. I'm a Randy Couture fan, so I have to love clinching. It's not just because I say Holly homing. But I like her work in the clinch. I think she's tough. She is tough as nails, and physically tough and mentally tough. I know people might bring up the Nunes fight, but you have to remember she re-broke her leg that she broke in the motorcycle accident from the low kicks. And this was her first fight back since that break, I believe. And she was like, you got to call this fight. And that's a bad corner. That's not on her. We should normalize corner stoppages. That's not on her. That's not on her being weak or anything, any macho kind of mentality. That's on the corner.
And that injury completely impacted how she was trying to fight, because if you watch Raquel Pennington fight, she does like to come forward a lot. And in that fight, she was just having to back up because she just couldn't put any weight forward on that leg. And look, one-sided fight. I'm not going to try and argue that Raquel would have won that fight or anything, but you can't read up on that story and think that was the best version of herself.
No, I think I 100% agree with you when I say that. That wasn't the best version of her. She got re-injured pretty early in the fight. She was coming off of an injury that got re-injured. That had to be a traumatic experience, so that definitely messes with your head. And while I think the fight would have been a dominant win for Nunes, I don't think she would have. I think she would have been a little bit more competitive at least. Because Nunes doesn't necessarily like pressure. And Rocky's a much better striker than Wine Mom, Juliana Pena. I mean, so you never know.
So let's talk about Mayra Bueno Silva. There is two sides to this story here. So a 10-2 record, and also has the one draw as well. Now the last fight was a no contest against Holly in that June fight. Notable wins outside of the Holly fight. Now this is interesting to me. I think if you were to compare Rocky's portfolio to Mayra's, I think Mayra has the bigger individual win in the form of Holly, who of course Rocky failed to beat twice. But outside of that, Lena Landsberg, Stephanie Egger, Wu Yanan, Marva Romero Barella, managed to get that one out there. Yeah. Like, honestly, I would make the argument her second best win is Jillian Robertson. Is this somebody who is genuinely coming on, or is this somebody who's in the right place at the right time?
I think it's a mix of both. I think she's good. I think she's definitely good. But, it wasn't like she was dominating that Holly Holm fight. She just kind of survived against that terrible Wallenstall, and then Holly ducked her head down, and then she got snatched up. That happens. And that's a fantastic win. She beat someone that has people respect her in the division. And for the hardcore fans, she beat someone that we love to see lose because we hate watching her fight. But, and that really boosted her stock just up. I think, outside of the Holly Holm fight, it's got to be Jillian Robertson.
Do you know what's the ironic thing with this fight? Is that this is the type of fight that they would have given Raquel Pennington. Like, let's say 2 or 3 years ago. Raquel Pennington versus Mayra Bueno Silva is happening when Rocky's at like number 5 or number 6 in the division and Mayra's top 10. But just the circumstances of the weight class, this one's happening for the belt.
It's kind of crazy when you think. That's a good point. Yeah. This is 110% a fight Rocky would have had on some prelim or a fight night main card. Prelim. Yeah. Oh, sadly. Yeah.
Because that's when, like, they showed the Macy Chasson fight. So you know how they always, like, show a fight to try and sell, like, the title matches coming up. And that fight was, like, I think it was, like, the third fight on the Apex prelim. I'm tempted to say Harry Hunsucker versus Justin Taffer got a higher billing than Raquel Pennington versus Macy Chasson.
I remember that card. It did. Harry Hunsucker. He's in our Hall of Fame on the previous show, though.
He is. So we did. Yeah. I think one of the best jobs we ever did was trying to sell Harry Hunsucker and some of the positives that he had going into that fight.
Yeah, him and Parker Porter. Like, I'm not saying that we deserve awards like Morning Combat, but I'm just saying I don't remember Luke and Brian talking up Parker Porter, like we did. But anyways, that's a crazy one. Isn't that the fight that also broke Macy's streak?
Yeah, Macy was on. No, I think Macy was alternating wins and losses.
Oh, because remember she was super hot for a while.
She had that good win against Renault, and I think they booked a Rocky fight afterwards.
I think so, because I remember thinking when I saw her on Tough, I remember going, "Oh, this chick's killing everybody, isn't she?" Like, and she's dropping down in weight. Good, yeah. This chick's gonna kill everyone because she was so impressive. Like that happens on Tough sometimes where someone is just clearly a couple levels above the rest, and it's like, "Oh, you're winning, huh? Aren't you?" Yeah. Okay.
Dominated Pacheco, and we've seen what Larissa Pacheco can do in the PFL.
Oh yeah, she's good. She's in the gal stable for sure. Yeah.
So, what are the big attributes you've seen of Mayra Bueno Silva? What is she doing to find this sort of success at 135?
For me, she's a finisher on the ground. I think her being a finisher definitely helps out too when it comes to, because the finishing rate, and I'm not trying to make any statements or weird, like I don't want anyone trying to twist my words here, but the finishing rate in men's to women's MMA, men's naturally has a much higher finishing rate. But she is a finisher. Like she isn't an Amanda Nunes where she's KOing or submitting everybody, at least most people. but she has she armbarred Gillian Robertson. She choked out. I think she submitted Lena Landsberg with an
I think it
armbar.
was a leg lock.
Oh, that's even more impressive. Yeah, leg locks don't really happen in women's MMA. And the reason for that, I think, that I've heard is because jiu-jitsu practitioners don't feel comfortable teaching dangerous leg locks to women, which is, I hope that's not true, because that is horrible to me. But that's super impressive. She got a leg lock, though. And obviously she ninja choked Holly Holm. So she can, if she snatches a limb or a neck, she's going to get it. And she does hit hard. She technically has some power, and she's aggressive. I think those are things that are kind of interesting, because I think they're going to just meet in the middle in this fight. And then from there, we see what happens.
Because a lot of people forget that how she set up the ninja choke it was very early stages of the second round. And she catches Holly with this quite a good punch as Holly's sort of like circling to the back. And that forces Holly to think, oh, I just need to get into my comfort zone here just to recover. And as she dives for the double legs, then comes the ninja choke.
Yeah, just snatches it.
So that does make me a little bit concerned for Rocky, given how comfortable Rocky likes to be in the clinch. The difference being, I think Rocky uses a lot of sort of trips and throws rather than going for the legs. So I don't think that opportunity is going to be there if Rocky does want to take it to the ground. But I don't think Rocky's going to want to. I think she knows the threat that Mayra could play. And I think if Rocky's going to win this fight, it's going to be in two places. She's going to need to be controlling the clinch, firing in those knees, throwing in that dirty boxing, or just keeping it in the open. Mayra, meanwhile, is going to be putting on a lot of pressure. And it could very well be a situation, in my opinion, of who breaks first. Is Rocky going to handle that early pressure, or is she going to wilt and Mayra get this fight to the ground and get subbed? Or can Rocky survive the onslaught, which we've seen how mentally tough she's been in the past, how physically tough she is. I have a lot of concerns. For me, one of the big factors is this. Someone pointed this out. Outside of a UFC debut, Mayra Bueno Silva has fought her entire career without a crowd. Bearing in mind how hard she goes early, and bearing in mind that crowd hyping her up,
the best crowd, you could say, honestly.
Could Mayra adrenaline dump?
You brought that up to me this week, and I was already kind of thinking about that. When my research, I remember going, there's no crowd here. And then when you brought that up, I was like, oh, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, I think Rocky has a draining kind of style as well that plays into it. You know, being clinched up against the cage and getting kneed and punched and nearly taken down over and over is exhausting. Like lactic acid building up, all this, and you're being hyped up by what I think is the best crowd in MMA. No disrespect to the UK crowd, because I mean I've seen like bad, like it wasn't the I think it was Aspinall Curtis Blades wasn't a very good card, but the Volkov one was. Their crowd, y'all's crowd is insane in the UK. They are fantastic, fantastic fans there. But Canada has the best, I think, still. And I think that can play into it. I think she wins early rounds. And then I think Rocky just stays in there, doesn't go away. I think that's just draining. So I think the adrenaline dump plus Rocky's very grinding, that's the word I was looking for, very grinding, cardio-heavy style, just cardio draining, is just going to propel her to probably one of your favorite moments in MMA history, but also one of the saddest, because trust me, I know. It's a very sad feeling when you have to remove someone from your boys' stable because they've graduated. I did it with Alexa Grasso last year. I think it's your turn to do it. Well,
I certainly hope so from a biased perspective. I do have some concerns with the inactivity of Rocky, and if she is going to win, she's going to have to break the 35 curse.
Oh, that's true.
Which I'm very nervous about. I'm personally leaning towards Mayra winning for those two reasons. And I think if I was to put my business head on, I think Mayra winning might be the better result for the weight class because she's a finisher. She's not tarred with the Nunes brush, so women's 135 can rebuild from like a fresh slate, because
Yeah.
you will get people saying, oh, Raquel's only champion because Nunes isn't there. Whereas you might not say that if Mayra's champion. And also, she is a bigger personality. Whether that's a good personality or a bad one, that remains to be seen. I find it ironic that a lot of the things that people like about Mayra are things people
They don't like
dislike
about-
about Julie. I think they're very similar
fine.
personalities. But I will say this, and this will be sort of my final sort of monologue. And if I do come across a little bit biased, I apologise. Might get like, I don't know, like Elgar's, like, no, what's it called? Gustav Holst's Planets or something in the background of this bit. No. I think there's a lot of fans who either don't know or choose not to know how good a fighter is. Because they've got a workhorse style, because they're a quiet personality, because they're not on a microphone sort of screaming, I smash everyone all the time. I put Raquel Pennington in that bracket. Like, he was a fighter who has been in or around the top 5 pretty much since the Ronda era. She's got the second most wins in division history. But because of those things that I mentioned, people don't want to appreciate her. And sometimes I feel you need that title to make people truly appreciate how good they are. Like, Michael Bisping, for me, is the best example. And bearing in mind what Raquel Pennington has been through in her career, and bearing in mind that she's just always been this dogged worker who just never gave up, it would be good to see her get that belt in this final chapter of her career. I think that would be a lovely story.
I think so too. I think for the story, you got to be a Rocky on Rocky's side. What a moment this is going to be, at least in my opinion. I predict it is going to be that moment. But for business, yeah, you made a fantastic point there. They kind of want MBS to win. They want Mayra Bueno Silva to win because here's something I thought about a comparison. When they had Michael Chandler and Charles Oliveira fight for the title after Khabib left, the reason they picked those two was because neither one had lost to Khabib, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Yeah. So there is precedence for this. And it did rebuild lightweight after losing your dominant champion that was a star. So I'm not saying Nunes is a star, I'm saying Khabib was, but I think that's something, the sad reality of it. But I'm a pro wrestling fan. I'm a film fan. I want the story. I want to have that moment. So I'm rooting for you to graduate her.
Well, it remains to be seen. I'm going to be on tenterhooks for that one, I have to be honest.
Yeah.
So let's talk about our main event of the evening. The middleweight title is going to be on the line here. It is the champion, Sean Strickland. Can't believe I'm going to be saying that. And he's going to be taking on Dricus du Plessis. Strickland comes in as a minus 130 favourite. You can get du Plessis at plus 110. So the closest odds on the entire card are going to be taking part in the main event. So I'm going to put this to you, Joe. If I asked you 12 months ago that Sean Strickland and Dricus du Plessis were going to be fighting for the middleweight title, would you have believed me?
I would have been laughing. And I probably would have looked up mental health care in Newcastle and like, hey, I found some links I think you need to look into. When you said champion Sean Strickland, it just settled in for me. He's world champion, and he's fighting Dricus du Plessis.
Would you say Strickland is the strangest champion? Is he the most unlikely champion?
No, there's a stranger one, I think. The most unlikely, maybe, but strangest champion ever is Benson Henderson. I've been thinking about him all week. And like you and me have talked in like side chats of like how weird Bendo's title run is. Like it's a weird one when you think about it. Like I think you can argue that he lost his title shot, and then I think for sure he lost his against the Frankie rematch. He beat Nate Diaz for sure, but then you go, okay, like, did you actually beat Giblert? And then you lost to Anthony Pettis, and it's like, oh, So weird.
Yeah.
It's a weird run.
I will swear the Nate fans will probably argue that Nate won that fight.
Well, he did flip him off, so that's got to be at least a 10-7 round for Nate. That is a crazy image though, when like he's like nearly doing the splits in the X guard, and Nate like can't get control of the heel, and Nate just I did it off camera so we don't get flagged, but just flips him off. It's amazing. Yeah, I'm sure there's a Nate fan saying that like, well, bro, if there was no time limits, bro.
Should I tell you? Should I tell you one of the things I quite like about this fight? Because it's very similar, in my opinion, to the co-main event in that I think a lot of fans are somewhat clowning this match a bit.
Yeah.
But should I tell you what I'm much more positive about this, and I'll say why. I think the UFC have become increasingly obsessed with pushing fighters based for outside reasons. So either you've got a rivalry with a guy, you've been like running your mouth off on social media, you've got a flashy style, that sort of thing. I like the fact that we've got two guys here who, yes, are awkward. Yes, say and do strange things outside of the cage. But they've got this fight because they've earned it.
Yes. This is a meritocracy fight.
Because like I heard some people saying, well, what about Khamzat? And I said, well, hang on a minute. How many ranked middleweights has Khamzat Chimaev beaten? 0.
Yeah. How many, and here's the crazier statistic. How many middleweight GOAT contenders have these guys beaten? They both have one apiece, and in their most recent fights where they dominated. Like, Rob is a middleweight GOAT. I think he is.
But you dismissed Anderson because of his steroid use.
Yes, we need to add that disclaimer. I dismiss Anderson because if you pop hot, I have to question every fight. Every fight's a no contest once you pop hot for me. And then Izzy, sadly, is a middleweight GOAT contender. And they just both dominated them in their last fights. They killed off. This division had, we talked about it earlier, this division had the same problem featherweight had with Volkanovski and Max Holloway. And these two guys just dominated their own boogeyman in their division. They've earned the shot. It's crazy to me. I never in a million years. I remember. I'm still embarrassed how wrong I was when I was like, Rob wins however way he wants, or like there's no chance. And then I had to eat my words as I'm watching Rob get leveled by Dricus du Plessis, like weird, like punches like that.
Someone said it, how you have those like elongated boxing gloves with like the cross checks. It's like that. That's how Dricus punches.
He reminds me of a Rock'em Sock'em robot. Like the little. That's what he reminds me of.
I heard someone describe him as a Bailey buddy as well, like the inflatable chew men with the arms.
Yeah, the Bailey buddies. I remember that. Oh no, he's a weird fighter. He's a guy that's really hard to describe his style. Is he a striker or a grappler? I like to think of him as shoulder-based because he has the widest shoulders I've ever seen.
He carries a ton of muscle.
Yeah, he's a huge guy.
McMahon would like him. Vince McMahon would like him.
Yeah, let's just say that if he doesn't, Vince is gone. I was going to say, if this fight don't work out, there's a guy with a mustache you can call up, I'm sure. They're one company now, sadly. Yeah. So,
tell you what, I wouldn't be surprised if Vince tries to set up his own promotion just out of spite.
With blackjack and
when hookers.
I didn't want to say that, but I was like, I'll let you say that. Yeah, he's gonna Futurama it.
Well, blackjack and hookers would go, given he looks like he basically Clark Gable now, very sort of like.
Ah, yeah, he does look like Clark Gable. Yeah. I'm a big nerd. I used to have it before displates are pieces of crap. But I used to have the Fallout New Vegas sign. I used to get a lot of love from it in the comments. But he looks like Mr. House in that game to me. I even have that meme of him. But yeah, this is a weird fight. And I think it's a sleeper pick. I think this is the sleeper pick for fight of the night, though. This fight could be incredible.
I hate to say it, I think so as well. Yeah, I think there's a lot of intangibles about this fight where I'm genuinely struggling to call it. So we'll talk about Strickland first and foremost. 28-5 record. We actually did a full career retrospective on Sean Strickland breaking down some of his background, which I significantly recommend that people check out. So outside of the Adesanya win, which is the big marquee victory he has, also has wins over Imavov, Jack Manson, Uriah Hall, Brendan Allen, again, another win which has aged very well. And
Finish too.
What do you think has been the big X factor that has turned around Sean Strickland? Because I see a lot of people, and I actually brought this up on one of the social media posts that I made. There's a lot of people that try and downplay him beating Izzy and just say, well, Izzy wasn't 100%. Even if that's true, you're doing the winner a real discredit by saying that.
Yeah.
Sean Strickland can only beat the guy in front of him, and that version of Adesanya, he dominated.
Whichever version it was, yeah, he smoked it. I thought he was going to finish him. I remember, watching it and just laughing. I felt like I laughed for 25 minutes because I never in my life thought that would have happened. It's one of the funniest things of last year. Dare I say my number 2 for fight of the year, even though that fight isn't very good. Adesanya hater, in case anyone's forgot. I'm not an Adesanya guy. But I think if I were to point out, everyone loves to talk about his Philly shell, and I think Philly shell's an MMA. I'm going to say it, controversial opinion here, because people have started to say, oh, that's the way to do it in boxing and MMA. I think it's a stupid idea to Philly shell in MMA. That said, there's only one guy I can think of besides Sean Strickland who's made me go, actually, it's pretty smooth, is Dustin Poirier. I still think he has the best Philly shell I've seen in MMA. But in MMA, the reason I think it's not the smartest play is high kicks. I go, oh, shoulder roll that. I've only seen Tony do that. And that was prime Tony, pre 2 weight cuts and Gaethje Tony. I think kicking high is a great way to stop guys like head movement, and I think it's also a great way to attack someone with a Philly shell. But I could be wrong. I've never kicked a Philly shell, so I personally don't know. I could just be totally crazy. But Dustin Poirier was like the guy for like the Philly shell. I was like, oh, only he can get away with it because he's just so good and smart that he knows how to make it work. And no, Sean Strickland used it to beat up like Adesanya. He defended everything Adesanya did and countered him and walked him down. He defended low kicks really well. He doesn't really ever get hit. Like defensively, it's really hard to hit Sean Strickland. When you do hit him, he's got an okay chin. Like he survived some good shots from Cannonier, who hits like a truck. But then there's also Alex Pereira sending him flying across the octagon. He's the hardest hitter ever, pound for pound, though. Like we've talked about that. Like he's probably the pound for pound hardest hitter ever in the sport. Maybe him and Pride fully juiced up Vanderlei.
I'd go Carwin.
Oh, Carwin had it too, yeah. Carwin, I think Krokop, if you only count his left kick, probably number 1 actually. Because that's cemetery. You're not going to the hospital. That left leg cemetery. But
I'd love to do UFC 116 for the retro review.
Is that
That's the Brock Lesnar fight.
Carwin, right?
Yeah, and it also has Akiyama versus Lieben.
Lieben, yeah, that was like going. That's what I was saying. Is that I was like, yeah, that because that fight is unbelievable. Sexyama, 110% boy stable.
I remember Bonner versus Christoph being quite good as well.
That fight's awesome. It was crazy. They were co-fights of the night because one is clearly better than the other, but you have to give love to another fight that on any other card as fight of the night. I think that's so cool, the UFC to spread the love money wise, especially because everyone except Brock was probably making $20 to be there. But I gotta be honest, Sean Strickland, I like that he's so blunt. He reminds me of people I know. Some people don't like that. Some things he says are like, dude, what is wrong with you? Kind of thing, oh God, stop talking, please. He comes across as that guy that, let's say you go out to a bar or a pub with, and he talks louder than everyone, buys a beer, and he just kills any chance of you meeting a woman because of the things he says. And it's like, why do I bring you out? Like, it's kind of the vibe I kind of get from him. That said, his story, his rise to the title, and he's kind of making me a fan. I'm starting to kind of get behind him.
I think the thing that endears a lot of people to Sean Strickland, like, look, I don't personally agree with a lot of Sean Strickland's beliefs or his personality, his politics, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I think there's a couple of things where he doesn't get the same flack as someone like Colby does. One, he can be really funny. Some of his lines in the press conferences, I admit, I just really giggle too. Because it's unchanged. It's like, he's saying the things you're thinking, like, God, dude, you really shouldn't be saying that.
Stop saying, yeah.
But also as well, the big one for me, it's natural.
Yeah, he's genuine.
I am seeing the real Sean Strickland there, whereas with Colby Covington, I saw a guy playing a character really badly. Strickland is what Colby should have been.
Mm-hmm. Strickland is, every time you see him, he's the realest guy in the room. Enzo Amore style. No, maybe don't be like that guy. But, like, I still love, if you're talking about great lines of his, I will never, my favorite is all time, is, because it turned out true, I will never lose to a guy who does certain things to cartoons. You know, keeping it a little PG here, but that's incredible. And I love that Adesanya, who thinks he's a good talker, actually isn't a good talker, I think. Going like, it's called this. And I don't do that, I swear. Like, you knew what it was called, though. Like, he beat you with your own words. Like, and then he beats Adesanya, and it's like, dude, he called it. He said he would never lose to a guy like that. Alex Bejeda doesn't do that, confirmed. Or Jared Cannonier. But
I don't know, Cannonier with all the crystal collecting and all that sort of stuff.
I don't know. I don't know. I could probably talk about this for a while. Like, what are people's yums? But just based on their fighting style. It's like, I think Brock Lesnar likes, oh God, I'm afraid to talk bad about him. He'll find me. Brock Lesnar likes women in their 40s that have poop in their bag. That happened. X-Pac pooped in Sable's bag. But yeah, I think this one thing that makes this matchup kind of fun is Sean Strickland defensively very good.
Yes.
Dricus du Plessis, when you watch him fight, you go, how is this punch working? There is no way in hell he's going to hit anybody. Then he does, and it's really weird, and it kind of like, I don't really know. He's such a weird striker that I wonder how that works against Sean Strickland. Like, I feel like there's only one of two outcomes here. Du Plessis hits him and hits him often because he's too weird, or Strickland laughs at him and goes, that's not going to work on me. I'm too defensively good. Because as much as I love Rob is super hittable. And I kind of think, like, Rob gets hit by everybody. Like, he wasn't the best defensively. So, the striking's interesting.
And a big thing to stand out when it comes to Dricus, I think an X factor here, we're talking about what could happen in the striking. I think people forget just how strong Dricus is and how he can use his grappling. Because, like, he's had 20 wins so far in his career. 19 of them have been finished in the distance. So, like, the Brad Tavares fight was the first time he went the distance. 10 submissions. He knows what to do on the ground. And that's something that Strickland just has not tried to sort of embrace during this sort of recent run. Like, I think Uriah Hall was the last time he took someone down.
Yeah, because I think he said he doesn't care for it. Like, he finds it boring. And he has a wrestling background, which is even funnier. I feel like with his wrestling background, I have a feeling that he's going to have success at stopping these takedowns. But then if he makes it, like, du Plessis can make it strength to strength and really get going from there. Like, because if you go technique for technique against him, du Plessis probably won't take him down. But if you make it a battle of strength in these takedown attempts, you're probably getting Sean Strickland down. But here's my X factor for this fight. Cardio. Du Plessis and Darren Till both looked like Ben Rothwell and Mark Hunt when they fought in Colorado. like he fought in Denver, and they were both like third round. They both were so gassed, and Du Plessis dug deep just to get that Hail Mary takedown and rear naked. How's he going to deal with a high output guy who's always throwing snap kicks, always throwing like slapping 1-2s?
And a lot of forward pressure.
Yeah, I feel like he's going to get worn out here. I mean, what was it? Was it Abus Magomedov?
Abus
Abus, as
Magomedov.
they say it. Yeah, yeah. Abus, he gassed out in the round. After having a ton of success, gassed out, and Sean Strickland put him out. Sean Strickland, who has pillow hands, put him out. That's actually kind of fun to think about. You have two guys who were thought never going to win the title, and they're infamous for pillow-handed boxing styles. And they win a title beating a guy who was considered unbeatable. Kind of interesting to think about between Bisping and Sean Strickland. Interesting dynamic there. Both known talkers. Both love to get on people's nerves.
Yeah. And I think, and they were both good talkers as well. Like, people forget Bisping had a hell of a lot of charisma.
It's one of my favorite press conferences ever, is Bisping drunk and just making fun of Luke Rockhold. Conceive, believe, achieve.
Shut the fuck up.
Yeah. It's one of the best ever.
And I will say, from being from the UK, I know so many Michael Bispings. Nearly everybody in that sort of pub culture talk and act like him.
I love it.
Yeah. Which way are you leaning towards this one? If you had to gun to your head, you're putting money on this, who are you going for?
I'm picking Sean Strickland here. I think he's just better, but Du Plessis has made me look like a fool twice in a row now. Is he going to do it a third time? Is he getting the hat trick? I don't know. But I think Du Plessis has success early. Then he realizes Sean is still here and he's still talking trash to me. Uh-oh. And I think we kind of see a similar performance like I expect in the co-main event. And that's actually kind of fun when you kind of think about the parallels there even. Because it's explosive finisher as the like on the blue corner, and then on the red corner it's
workhorses,
and questionable gas tanks never get tired. It's interesting. It's kind of interesting to think about. I think personally, I think it's a decision. I don't think Strickland finishes him. I don't think Strickland has the oomph on his strikes to do it. I'll say this: Roberto Soldic had a hard time putting away Dricus Du Plessis, so I don't know if and that was at 170 was it 185 I think it was, but
I think regardless, it was 170 the Soldic fight.
I think so too. That means he was even more dehydrated. It means it was easier to get concussed. So his chin's going to be better at 185 naturally, just based on biology. I think you have to lean towards Strickland not finishing Du Plessis, but I think it's a decision. I think that's where if I had to put money, gun to my head, all that, I'm picking Sean Strickland by decision. I think 4 rounds to 1.
I'm going to lean towards Strickland as well. I'm going to go 48-47. I think DDP is going to take the first 2 rounds, and then Strickland comes on. The irony is, though, like, I have to be honest, in terms of who I want to win, I'm not really sort of like emotionally invested in either fighter, personally. I mean, I enjoyed doing the Strickland video and learning a lot more about this guy, but in terms of the two of them, I'm not really too invested.
Yeah,
but
that's fair.
Sounds strange. I'm picking Strickland to beat DDP, but I think DDP could do better against Hamzat.
It's fair.
Because DDP is a lot more physical and can neutralize that sort of round 1 burst.
I think, well, here's how I look at it. Du Plessis versus Hamzat kind of comes across as a Goldberg type figure. And Usman was his William Regal, of course.
Good way to look at it. I really enjoy that. That's really good.
Yeah, I just not thought about that. I was like, that actually makes perfect sense.
Who's Gilbert?
And, Gilbert is, I almost said Gilbert, but I was like, that's not fair. Haku, because they had to mace Haku afterwards with that guy with the luscious locks. the best hair and like, oh, I love that. Ah, that and I won't be talking bad about Gilbert like Mr. OOC talks about Haku. I'm more afraid of Gilbert Burns than Haku. But I think is Duplessis the actual DDP? Does he get a diamond cutter out of a jackhammer in that fight? Bang. Every time you say DDP, I always just think, don't say it, don't say it, don't say bang.
I can tell, like, I listen to the Morning Combat whenever they talk about Dricus Duplessis, and you could tell Luke Thomas really doesn't want to refer to him as DDP because he knows he's going to set Brian away.
Yeah, every time I hear it, I just go, don't say it. It's like I basically have the inner monologue of me looking into a mirror. You're a big boy. You said no more wrestling jokes. Don't say bang. Bang. But you get Kimberly Page, actually, so maybe good for him.
True.
Good for him. Good for him.
I have to say, Joe, I did come into this 297 preview not with the highest expectations we could get an entertaining show, but I think we've done that.
We're pretty good at this job, I think.
Well, I certainly hope so. It's like, please give us some money.
For Patreon. Listen, all week, me and Karl have been coming up with Patreon exclusive content, and I gotta be honest, all of it sounds so much fun to just shoot and do. So if you want to see, like, us get weird, no, just kidding. No, it's we've been talking about some really cool stuff for the Patreon to make it more like,
more value for money.
Yeah, and more like exclusive. You're in the cool club. I might even give you my I'm not going to do that. I was going to say give you my personal number. Like, no, I'm not going to do that. No. Unless you know Cheyenne Vlismas, I ain't doing it.
We actually do have a Patreon video which is going to be out now. This is going to be Patreon exclusive. So if you do want to check that out, you know where to go. Patreon.com/It's Not Cagefighting. Your contributions will be more valued than ever before. Also as well, Joe, one of the things that you can do if you subscribe to Patreon is get our upcoming videos a little bit earlier, including a retro review that we have planned out. So the theme for this one, of course, we are in Canada. So we had a selection of Canadian UFC events. Which one did our public vote for? Which one did you cover?
Now, when it comes to memorable cards, this has to be it. This was the record-breaking, until Adesanya Whitaker, but this was the record-breaking fight between Jake Shields and, I'm not impressed by your performance, George St. Pierre. And I got to be honest, this card, well, I'm not going to spoil it, but the co-main event's incredible. Like, if you want to see some good, honest violence in Canada, that's what I was doing this whole card, looking for that violence in Canada. You get Jose Aldo versus Mark Hominick. You also have the legend Randy Couture taking on Lyoto Machida. And, Benson Henderson fights Mark Bocek. And Jason Brills fights Vladimir Matyushenko.
You of course, talked about UFC 129.
Oh, yeah, I couldn't remember the number. I was hoping you would cover that. I'm terrible with numbers, but I'm great with, like, once you name a fight on it, it's like, yeah, I remember that card. Like, up to down almost. But I'm terrible with the numbers. Yeah, UFC 129 was our pick. I think it's a really good pick because any chance to discuss GSP, I would take. Because I'm going to be honest, I think he's the greatest ever. I don't even think it's close. Yeah. Even with steroids, it's not even close for me.
And you're going to be talking about one of GSP's opponents during that legendary title reign. The poll for the February card is already online. So that one with UFC 298 taking place in California. We thought we would celebrate one of California's greatest sons. So, Joe, who is going to be the subject of our next video? And what are the nominees that the public can choose from?
Well, let me pull up the nominee list, unless you have it. I remember two of them because we talked about it.
I think we should have rehearsed this bit.
I know, but hey, listen, like, I'm classically trained in improv. I'm not. I just cover for me here. Let's say I was. I'm pretty good at at it, but let's just say, we don't rehearse because we ain't scared, homie, of messing up live. Okay, so that means obviously we're talking about Nick Diaz himself, the best Diaz, honestly.
To type it to try and find it.
Yes, I am. I'm breaking. But yeah, Nick Diaz, and it's Strikeforce. Probably the one everyone's like really excited for is you have, oh no, Daly versus Nick Diaz, which one of the best round one fights ever. Strikeforce Miami. I get to talk about Herschel Walker, go down that weird rabbit hole. Don't you want to like? Come on, that one's weird. And BJ Penn, I don't have it up yet. I'm just remembering. BJ Penn versus Nick Diaz. His not debut. I've heard some people say that, but his return to the UFC where he took on Nick Diaz. It was actually supposed to be, him versus GSP on that card. It was kind of funny. And then he didn't show up for a thing, so they were like, fine, Carlos Condit's fighting GSP now. And then George got hurt. And then we get to hear the incredible rant of, I don't think George is hurt. I just think he's scared. You know, where you at, George? Like, we get to have that epic moment, which is just fantastic. And the final one, don't tell me, Karl, I'm going to remember and or look it up. So bad. What's wrong with me?
It's another Strikeforce card.
Yeah, with Shamrock Diaz. Actually, that card's awesome, too. Yeah. So we have Strikeforce Shamrock Diaz, Strikeforce Miami, which honestly... Oh, also Bobby Lashley's on that card. Do you want me to talk about Bobby Lashley? That sounds
Robbie
sick.
Lawler versus Melvin Manhoff.
Yeah. I'm not even going to spoil what happens in that fight, but hearing those names, trust me if you haven't seen it, it's incredible. Strikeforce Diaz Daly, which I honestly, the card is good, but that fight is really good. But remember, you're not voting for the main event. You're voting for the whole card. So just saying... Miami's a really good card. And a UFC 137. There's your options. Right now, I think one is winning, but I don't want to influence y'all's voting, so I won't say who.
Certainly not. But if you do have a Patreon request of your own, if there's a card that you want Joe explicitly to cover, then you can donate for that at patreon.com/It's Not Cage Fighting. For just $1, you can select any card that you want to. We appreciate all your contributions that you can make. Joe has a lot of fun recording these, and I have a lot of fun splicing them together. We also have a lot of fun covering the preview shows, Joe, and we will be doing it once again in a short order, because I think it's only like a 3-week turnaround before we go to California for UFC 298. Alexander Volkanovski has had a reign of dominance atop the featherweight division. Could that come to an end against his toughest opponent yet, the unbeaten Ilia Topuria? That's all to look forward to. My name's been Karl Bainbridge, that's been Joe Neal, and we will be seeing you again in just 3 weeks' time. This is the INC. Thank you for watching.